Welcome to US Secret Agenda YouTube channel. The frictions on the Ukrainian border continue with all their harshness. Confirming with satellite images and intelligence studies that Russia has deployed more than 130,000 troops on the border, the United States now considers it certain that Russia will attempt to invade Ukraine. Russia, on the other hand, said that it did not intend to invade Ukraine, but could not provide concrete evidence of this. Because of these unusual activities, the North Atlantic Alliance is worried that this year Russia will launch a new campaign against Ukraine. In response to this threat from Russia, the North Atlantic Alliance prioritized strengthening its members among the Baltic states. So much so that the alliance deployed 4 battalions of international military forces to Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia and Poland. Soldiers from Canada, Germany, England and the USA also joined the international force. It has been announced that these soldiers will be mobilized in the first phase until more troops are sent from the North Atlantic Alliance. At the same time, the US is keeping ready to send Abrams tanks and Bradley armored vehicles to the Ukrainian border, which may oppose Russian armored vehicles in the region. It was also announced that some air defense systems and electronic warfare aircraft were deployed alongside the US soldiers deployed to bases in many Eastern European countries in the region. In response to the Russian tanks, the United Kingdom and the United States also shipped large numbers of NLAW and Javelin ATGMs to the region. Ukraine had suffered greatly from ATGMs, especially when the Donbass fell years ago, and it is thought that these ATGMs will be used most efficiently against the Russian armored threat in the region. Following these moves, the US announced on Wednesday that the Pentagon approved the sending of 3,000 additional troops to Eastern Europe to protect the members of the North Atlantic Alliance from aggression. Pentagon Press Secretary John F. Kirby said these deployments are in addition to Defense Secretary Lloyd J. Austin's orders for 8,500 soldiers to prepare for deployment. These troops are not involved in this movement. About 2,000 soldiers of the 82nd Airborne Division deploy components of an infantry brigade combat team from Fort Bragg in North Carolina to key facilitators to Europe and Poland, and the 18th Airborne Corps carries a joint task force-capable headquarters to Germany, said. Kirby said a 1,000-strong Army Stryker fleet will be deployed from Germany to Romania, joining about 900 U.S. service members already in that country. The insertion took place at the open invitation of the Romanian government. The first U.S. troops arrived in Germany by Friday evening. The first U.S. troops from the 18th Air Force Command have arrived in Germany, strengthening alliance allies in Eastern Europe and Germany as Russia builds up on the Ukrainian border, the U.S. military's European Command said on Friday. As of today, the troops set out for Romania via Germany. Today, a local mayor in Poland announced the shipment to Poland and said that the incoming soldiers were from the 82nd Division of the U.S. Army. A spokesperson for the Polish military said that U.S. troops arrived in Poland on Saturday as part of the North Atlantic Alliance's moves to send extra troops amid fears that Russia might invade Ukraine. The first group has arrived at the airport in Jesionka, in southwestern Poland, Major Przemysław Lipczynski said, adding that the bulk of the 1,700 U.S. troops will arrive soon. Western capitals accused Russia of recruiting more than 100,000 troops to pro-Western Ukraine's borders in preparation for invasion and promised to impose devastating sanctions if it attacked Moscow. There are 2 main countries that cannot tolerate Ukraine's being in such a great threat. One of them is the USA and the other is the UK. While the US wants to prevent the Russians in the region from advancing in Europe, the UK is struggling to stand by its promise as Ukraine's guarantor. The United States on Thursday accused the Kremlin of concocting an elaborate plan with fake video to fabricate an attack by Ukrainian forces that Russia could use as a pretext to launch military action against its neighbor. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said the plan includes making a graphic propaganda video that will show staged explosions and use actors depicting corpses and mourners. The U.S. did not provide detailed information to support the claims. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu on Thursday checked in Minsk the preparations for the major Russian-Belarusian war games scheduled for February 10 to 20. Shoigu met with the president of Belarus Alexander Lukashenko. Speaking about the exercises, Lukashenko said that the aim is to strengthen the Ukrainian border. The move came shortly after documents were leaked showing Washington's readiness to discuss troop and missile reductions with Moscow. After the announcement, the Kremlin said the deployment was a destructive move. Destructive steps that have not been confirmed by anyone, escalate military tensions and reduce the scope of political decisions, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Grushko told Russia's news agencies. The fact that these moves of Russia, which has deployed 30,000 more troops to Belarus besides the Ukrainian border, give the appearance of a Putin ready to pull the trigger, has mobilized the West altogether. In an interview in Brussels, EU chief Ursula von der Leyen warned that any military attack against Ukraine would face severe consequences and huge costs for Russia. Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping supported his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, in his standoff with the West over Ukraine, as the two leaders met ahead of the Beijing Olympics opening festivities. At the same time, Russia sent 2 long-range nuclear-capable bombers on Saturday to patrol over ally Belarus, which the Kremlin says has practical interaction with the Belarusian Air Force. Moscow denied that it wanted war. He says NATO expansion near its borders poses a national security threat and wants a commitment from Ukraine, formerly part of the Soviet Union, that it will never join the transatlantic military alliance. The French president and German chancellor will travel to Moscow and Kiev in the coming weeks, adding to diplomatic efforts to deter Russian President Vladimir Putin from launching an invasion and to find a way out of the escalating tension. French President Emmanuel Macron spoke by phone with U.S. President Joe Biden on Wednesday to update his diplomatic pressure on Washington. And on Thursday night, the French leader spoke with Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky about identifying elements that could de-escalate, and strategic equilibrium conditions that would allow risk reduction in Europe. Guarantee security on land and on the continent. While France is a key player in NATO and sending troops to Romania as part of the alliance's preparations for possible Russian action, Macron has also been actively pushing for dialogue with Putin and has spoken to him several times in recent weeks. Macron's office said the two will hold a one-on-one meeting this Monday. Macron is not the only European leader to head east. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz will visit Ukraine and Russia in mid-February and contribute to diplomatic efforts to resolve the crisis centered on Russian troops gathered near Ukraine's borders. Government spokesman Wolfgang Buchner said on Friday that Scholz will travel to Kiev on February 14 and to Moscow the next day. The trip will follow a pre-scheduled meeting with Biden in Washington. Buchner said the German government is consulting with France and Poland for a meeting between the leaders of the three countries, but no date has yet been set. He said Scholz would welcome the leaders of the 3 Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, on Thursday, at the premiership. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Andrea Sass said that Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock will visit Ukraine on Monday and Tuesday, including a trip to the line of contact with rebel-held areas in eastern Ukraine. It's unclear how much of an impact the trips will have, after weeks of talks in various diplomatic formats failed to yield significant concessions from Russia and the United States. However, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba said on Friday that high-level visits have seriously reduced security challenges and upset the Kremlin's plans. Meanwhile, Russian Federation President Vladimir Putin had the support of his Chinese counterpart amid fears in the West that Moscow was preparing for military action against Ukraine. Putin met with Xi ahead of the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics in Beijing, and the leaders issued a joint statement highlighting what other states are calling interference in internal affairs, as Russia collects troops on the Ukrainian border. Some powers, which represent a minority on the world stage, continue to advocate unilateral approaches and resort to military policy in solving international problems, the article, which is seen as a reference to the United States and its allies, said. The Chinese side sympathizes and supports the proposals put forward by the Russian Federation to establish long-term legally binding security guarantees in Europe, the statement said. The meeting took place amid fears in the West that Moscow might be looking for a way to start the conflict with Kiev. On Thursday, the United States accused the Kremlin of concocting an elaborate plan to fabricate an offensive by Ukrainian forces that Russia could use as a pretext to launch military action against its neighbor. At the same time, the president of Poland, who saw that China and Russia were getting closer, announced that he would go to Beijing to discuss the Ukraine issue. The Polish president was the only European Union leader to attend the Winter Olympics, which began on Friday, with his office lobbying to maintain good relations with China and reduce Russia-Ukraine tensions. His office said President Andrzej Duda is scheduled to meet with Chinese leader Xi on Sunday, but is not expected to meet with Putin, who is also in Beijing. Other EU leaders followed the US, UK, Australia and Canada, among others, in an announced or unspecified diplomatic boycott of the Games due to China's human rights record and allowed their athletes to compete. Duda's foreign policy advisor, Jakub Kumik, said the president wanted to seize certain diplomatic opportunities offered by the many leaders meeting in Beijing. The purpose of these talks is to encourage the interlocutors to play an active role in leading the Russia-Ukraine negotiations, Duda's press office said in a statement.